Yo, what's going on, yo? I'm JB Hoops, and today I got for you the first mock draft of the 2022 NBA draft, and let's get right into it. So because the lottery hasn't been done, I'm just going strictly off records. So with the number 1 pick in the 2022 NBA draft, I have the Houston Rockets selecting Jabari Smith Jr. Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun appear to be the cornerstones of the Houston Rockets franchise. So I have the Rockets taking Jabari Smith Jr., who they can slide into the front court with Sengun, but this means they will probably have to move on from Wood in the offseason, which I think they will. Jabari Smith provides spacing, great size and length, and will be able to help out Sengun defensively, which is the area he struggles the most. Jabari Smith has a lot of NBA upside with his great defense, great shot creating ability at his size, and elite 3-point shooting. For Auburn this season, he averaged 16.9 points and 7.4 rebounds, as well as over a steal and block per game, shooting 43% from the field and a blistering hot 42% from deep. And whilst the number 1 pick is definitely going to be a hard decision to make this year, I think Jabari Smith Jr. fits the Rockets perfectly, and this will be a great pick for them. Next up, I have the Orlando Magic selecting Paolo Banchero, the freshman out of Duke. Wendell Carter Jr. seems to have solidified himself as the Magic's 5 of the future. They're already loaded with guards, Markelle Fultz, Cole Anthony, RJ Hampton, and the recent number 5 overall pick, Jalen Suggs. And they also took Franz Wagner, who can play the 3. So in this year's draft, I've got them taking Paolo Banchero, who would round out the Magic starting 5 perfectly, and he provides them with his polished game, underrated playmaking ability, his obvious scoring talent, and his superstar potential. At Duke this year, he's averaging 17.1 points per game, along with 7.7 rebounds and 3.2 assists, along with basically a steal and a block, shooting 48% from the field and 33% from 3, but I think he's a better shooter than the numbers show. This will be a great pick for the Magic, but I can definitely see Paolo going number 1. With the 3rd pick in the draft, I have a little bit of a surprise pick here. I have the Pistons going with Jaden Ivey. With the Pistons looking to be deeply entrenched into a rebuild for the next few seasons, with this pick they rectify their Killian Hayes selection from a few years back and take an electric guard in Jaden Ivey to pair with Cade Cunningham, Saddiq Bey, and the rest of their young core. Now they definitely could go with Chet Holmgren, but I think the Pistons are one of the most likely teams to pass up on one of the top 3 bigs to take Ivey, as they probably like their chances in the sweepstakes for Victor Wembanyama, who appears to be a generational prospect to be the 5 of their future. Next up is the OKC Thunder picking at 4, and they definitely luck out here. They're already crowded with guards in SGA, Giddey, Trey Mann, and Lou Dort, so they steal Chet Holmgren to be their long-term 5. He provides them with a lob threat and a defensive anchor with a 7'6" wingspan, and is just another potential unicorn to pair with Poku. On the season, he averaged 14.1 points per game, almost 10 rebounds, and 2 assists, along with 3.7 blocks, shooting an insane 61% from the field, but also 39% from 3. Chet can do it all and would be amazing for this Thunder team. With this pick, they're beginning to look a lot like the Mavs with the all-white guys, but I think you just can't pass up on Chet Holmgren if he falls to you at 4, so I think the Thunder are definitely the team for him. The Pacers look to have their backcourt of the future with Halliburton and Chris Duarte, so they select 18-year-old AJ Griffin. They could go with Keegan Murray here, but I think they take the younger prospect, as they used their lottery pick last year on Duarte, who was 24 years old. I also think they like Isaiah Jackson long-term at the 5, so Jalen Duren is probably off the cards. But in drafting AJ Griffin, they will receive his elite shooting. On the season, he shot 46% from 3, his strong frame, and solid defense with a 7-foot wingspan. I also am very hopeful for AJ Griffin that he regains some of his athleticism he had in high school, and if he eventually builds up to the level of athlete he was in high school, he's going to be insane in the league. On the season, he averaged 10.5 points, 4 rebounds, and half a steal and half a block, shooting 50% from the field and 46% from the 3 in just 24 minutes a game. I think AJ Griffin has one of the highest floors out of any of the rookies, and he will be a great fit for the Pacers. Next up is the Sacramento Kings at pick 6, and I have them taking Keegan Murray, the sophomore out of Iowa. The Kings go with the floor spacer here to counteract the shooting struggles of both De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis. With this pick, they're going with a more NBA-ready prospect who's 21 years old, and he should help push them into playoff contention, which is clearly what they wanted to do, trading Tyrese Halliburton at this year's deadline. On the season, he averaged 23.5 points per game, along with 8.7 rebounds, over a steal and almost 2 blocks a game, shooting 55% from the field and 40% from 3. Keegan Murray will help the Kings out, being a versatile frontcourt partner for Sabonis who can stretch the floor, score in bunches, and play great defense against multiple positions. I really think this is a pretty safe pick for the Kings, but you never know since it's the Kings, but I've been picking Keegan Murray. With the Blazers looking to contend again next season around a healthy Damian Lillard, I think they select Ben Mathurin, the sophomore out of Arizona. He's a great shooter, crazy athlete, and a plus defender, and I think he can definitely play the three with Dame and Anthony Simons on the court, and he will be able to help them on the defensive side of the ball immensely. On the season, he averaged 17.7 points per game, along with 5.6 rebounds and 2.5 assists, shooting 45% from the field and a solid 37% from three on very high volume. If all falls to shit in Portland, I think he can definitely be a great rebuilding piece if Portland decide to eventually move on from Dame. Next up is the Spurs at pick 8, and I have them going with Jalen Duren. The Spurs take the center of their future in 18-year-old Jalen Duren. They already look like they're their point guard of the future, took another guard last year in Josh Primo, and Keldon Johnson looks to have solidified himself as the 3 or 4 of their future. So taking a 5 in this draft seems like it would be a perfect fit. This probably makes Jakob Poeltl expendable, which makes sense as he is a little bit older than the rest of their core, and they could probably get a valuable piece in return for him. Jalen Duren is an elite athlete and a defensive presence with a 7'5" wingspan, but is a very raw offensive talent. At Memphis this year, he averaged 12 points per game along with 8 rebounds and over 2 blocks a game, shooting 60% from the field. But with DeJounte Murray setting him up early on in his career, I think he'll thrive, especially in the Spurs system. Now this next pick has a few weird protections, so it's the Lakers pick originally, and I'm pretty sure the Pelicans get it if it lands 1 to 10, and then the Grizzlies get it if it lands anywhere between 11 and pick 30. As of the current standings, the Pelicans will own this pick, and with them having a pretty well-rounded team and a young core, I can see them potentially trading this pick. But for now, I have them selecting the best player available, which is Johnny Davis. Johnny Davis can be another versatile scoring guard to add to their squad, and between CJ, BI, and Johnny Davis, they can definitely split up the playmaking duties, as they don't really have a true point guard except for Kira Lewis Jr., who is still injured. Johnny Davis averaged almost 20 points a game this season and 8 rebounds, as well as 2 assists, but he's a much better playmaker than the 2 assists show, while shooting 43% from the field and 31% from 3. He's a great scorer and defender, and I think he can be a much better spot-up shooter than his percentages show. At pick 10, I have the Blazers selecting Tari Eason, the sophomore out of LSU. They definitely don't need another guard, and are probably in need of a 5, but I don't think any of the center prospects will be worth selecting at 10, with Jalen Duren already off the board. And another guy who can space the floor and is more NBA ready than a few other possible candidates to pick here. On the season, he averaged 17 points and 6.6 rebounds, shooting 56% from the field and 36% from 3. But he's also great and versatile on the defensive end, averaging almost 2 steals a game and over a block. And I think he'll definitely fit this team really well, and it'll be very interesting to see how the Blazers offseason goes. With the 11th pick in the draft, the Wizards are up, and with them lacking clear direction and they're not really being a super great point guard prospect on the board, which is probably their position of need, they go with the upside and star potential of Jaden Hardy out of the G League Ignite. I think the Wizards probably move on from Beal this offseason with his outrageous contract demands, so taking Jaden Hardy could potentially fill that hole he leaves. But also in getting Jaden Hardy, they get one of the best shot creators in the class, who I also believe is a much better playmaker than most people think. During the G League Ignite tour, in which Jaden Hardy played 13 games, Jaden Hardy averaged 21.2 points, 4.1 rebounds and 3.9 assists, shooting 40% from the field and 34% from 3, which was much better than his atrocious numbers during the G League Showcase. Coming into the year, Jaden Hardy was seen by a lot of people to be potentially a top 5 pick, and a lot of people have dropped him down so far, even into the 20s, but for me I think he's great value at 11 for the Wizards, who could definitely use a guy with star potential. With the 12th pick in the draft, the Knicks go with the Kentucky guard, Ty Washington. The Knicks definitely need a point guard for the future, and whilst Ty is more of a combo guard than a playmaking point guard, I think between him and RJ Barrett, they'll definitely have more than enough playmaking. Ty Washington gives the Knicks a potential franchise point guard who can shoot it from deep, hold his own defensively with his 6'9" wingspan, and is comfortable playing on or off the ball. On the season for Kentucky, he averaged 12.5 points, 3.5 rebounds and almost 4 assists, shooting 45% from the field and 35% from 3. but his 3-point percentage dropped towards the end of the season, and for most of the year was hovering at around 40%. Next up is the Thunder with their second selection via the Clippers pick, and with the Thunder taking Chet earlier on in the draft, I believe they will go with another forward in Jeremy Sochan. The Thunder are going to have to make a lot of tough decisions with their countless draft picks, choosing who will be part of their future, but I think in taking 18-year-old Jeremy Sochan out of Baylor, they will get a versatile and tough defender, a solid playmaker, and just someone who will work perfectly with their guards. On the season, he averaged over 9 points and 6 rebounds, but where most of his value comes from is on the defensive side of the ball, where he averaged 1.3 steals and almost a block per game. He also shot 47% from the field and 30% from 3, but I think with the amount of open looks he'll get on the Thunder, he'll definitely be a better shooter than 30%. Now with the last lottery pick, I have the Atlanta Hawks selecting Dyson Daniels. Ever since the Hawks acquired Trae Young, they've had defensive issues, and they've made efforts with previous picks taking DeAndre Hunter and Onyeka Okongwu to attempt to hide Trae on the defensive end. But I think taking Dyson Daniels out of the G League Ignite, who is a great and versatile defender with a 6'11 wingspan, will be the perfect addition to add to their young core. During the G League Ignite tour, Dyson Daniels played 15 games, and in those averaged 12 points, 7.5 rebounds, and over 5 assists a game, shooting 46% from the field and 35% from 3. Dyson Daniels has grown to about 6'7 without shoes and can play multiple positions, and is a very good and switchable defender. During that run, he averaged 2.1 steals and 0.7 blocks. And he also just provides the Hawks with a 6'8 secondary playmaker. He's a solid athlete and has a versatile and well-rounded game. And I just think his fit with Trae Young and the Hawks is perfect. Now with the first non-lottery pick of this mock draft, I have the Charlotte Hornets selecting Ochai Agbaji, the senior out of Kansas. The Hornets desperately need some defense for the young run-and-gun team. They could go with someone like Mark Williams, who would definitely help that drastically, but they did select Kai Jones last year, and I think they have the pieces to trade for, or they could just sign a defensive 5 like Miles Turner. So in this mock draft, I have them taking Ochai Agbaji. He can replace Gordon Hayward. He's a very good defender, a super athlete, and a sniper from deep. He'll be the perfect fit with LaMelo, Rozier, and Miles Bridges on the wings, especially if they can get a defensive center this offseason. So far this season, he's averaged almost 19 points, over 5 rebounds, and a steal per game, shooting 47% from the field and 39% from 3 on a lot of attempts. And I think Ochai Agbaji is definitely a lottery talent, so picking him here at 15 is well worth it. Next up is the Houston Rockets with the Nets pick, and I have them selecting MarJon Beauchamp out of the G League Ignite. Houston get an athletic wing to pair with their young core, and I think MarJon will be able to help them out immediately on the defensive side of the ball. He's a very athletic prospect that can defend multiple positions at a high level, and kind of do a little bit of everything offensively, with his strength being his slashing ability. During the G League Showcase, he averaged about 15 points, shooting 57% from the field, and then on the tour, averaged a very similar number, including 6 rebounds, almost 2 assists, 1.6 steals, and 0.9 blocks, but also shot 30% from 3 on almost 3 attempts, which is very promising for MarJon. The Pacers are up next at 17 with their pick from the Cavs from the Caris LeVert trade, and I have them going with the upside of Patrick Baldwin Jr. here. Seeing as their rebuild only started this season, they will have to take a high upside picks, and I think taking PBJ at 17 is well worth the risk. He's a 6'9 wing, an extremely smooth athlete with a nice handle and a very good shot. He has Michael Porter Jr. type shot creation and shooting potential, but after a very disappointing season at Milwaukee, his stock kind of tanked, and he shot the ball very poorly there and only ended up playing 11 games. So I think taking the risk here at 17 is definitely worth it for the Pacers. At 18, the Timberwolves go with Montero out of the Overtime Elite. He's a super talented combo guard and has great shooting potential. He also has a very nice handle and is a pretty good facilitator, especially in the pick and roll. The T-Wolves take a young guard with all-star potential. He's someone who can create for himself and for others, and he will definitely be able to help the Wolves out, especially if someone like D'Lo or Ant are injured or having a rough shooting night. Up next at 19 is the Spurs via the Raptors pick. The Spurs have 3 picks in the draft, and I highly doubt they keep all 3. But since they've already taken Duren in this draft, I have them taking EJ Liddell, a stretch 4 who can play great defense, but he specializes in blocking shots, averaging over 2.5 per game on the season. He's a great shooter from deep, converting on 37% of his threes, and he will be great in the pick and pop. On the season, he averaged 19.5 points per game and 8 rebounds, shooting 50% from the field and the aforementioned 37% from 3. He's been shooting up big boards and for a good reason, and I think this would be a great pick for the Spurs. Coming in at 20 is the Bulls, and I have them picking Mark Williams out of Duke. The Bulls desperately need interior defense, and that has been made obvious by teams attacking Vooch all season. And Mark Williams is definitely the perfect center for this team. He's 7 foot tall and an elite shot blocker, averaging almost 3 blocks a game, and he has a 7'7" wingspan, which is insane. He's a great vertical spacer and rim runner, and I just think he'll be the perfect backup center for the Bulls, providing some energy off the bench and some defense. But that all depends what they do with Vooch this offseason, because Mark Williams definitely could start for a lot of teams. The Nuggets are up at 21, and I have them taking Malachi Branham out of Ohio State. The Nuggets at times lack shot creators, and Malachi Branham provides them someone who can make tough shots, but you can also trust him to play good defense and spot up. On the season, he averaged almost 14 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, and 2 assists, shooting 50% from the field and hitting 42% of his threes. He's a very intense defender with a 6'10" wingspan, and I think can be a bucket getter in the league. I also think he'll be able to play the 3, even though he is only about 6'5", but I think lineups with Jamal Murray, Bones Hyland, and Malachi Branham will be deadly. At 22, the Grizzlies are up with the Jazz's pick. They're another team with 3 picks in this draft, but with their second selection I have them going with the scoring guard out of Nebraska, Bryce McGowens. Bryce McGowens is a great athlete, an absolute bucket getter, but this year at Nebraska shot the ball pretty poorly, but I believe he can be a great shooter in the league. On the season, he averaged close to 17 points and over 5 rebounds, shooting 40% from the field and just 27% from deep, but I think he's a better shooter than what the numbers say. The Grizzlies are just such a deep team already, and I definitely think they're a team to look out for making an off-season splash or a draft night trade. But for now, I have them taking Bryce McGowens. At 23, we have Brooklyn via Philadelphia. I'm not sure if they'll keep this pick because they do have the option to defer it to 2023. But if Philly keeps slipping down the standings, I have them taking Jalen Williams at 23. He's a gritty player, one of the best charge takers I've ever seen, a great defender, an elite rebounder averaging almost 10 a game, and one of the best playmaking bigs in this class. On the season, he averaged about 11 points and 10 rebounds, as well as over 2.5 assists, with 1.3 steals and 1.1 blocks, shooting 46% from the field and about 24% from 3, but he can definitely hit it at times. With Andre Drummond probably gone this offseason and Blake Griffin becoming borderline unplayable, I think Jalen Williams can step in for the Nets and be a great rotational big. I also think he's a better fit with Ben Simmons if he ever ends up playing than any of their other bigs they have, because he has 3-point range and he will also just help their defense tremendously. The Mavs are up at 24 and I have them going with Nikola Jovic out of Serbia. They go with another stereotypical white guy pick here, but Nikola Jovic is super talented offensively. He can shoot it from anywhere on the court and in any fashion. At 6'10", he's a fluid mover with a tight handle, and he's also a very good athlete. So far this season, he's averaged about 11.3 points per game, along with 4.3 boards and 3.2 assists, shooting 42% from the field and 35% from 3. But with his smoothness and shot creation ability at his size, he's definitely going to be a first rounder, even though his stock has slipped a little bit from earlier on in the year, because he is going to struggle a lot on defense in the league. But with his talent, shooting and scoring ability, I think he's definitely going to be a first round pick and a great pick for the Mavs at 24. At 25, I have the Spurs picking Kendall Brown. He's someone who's probably slipped a lot further than they should have. He's probably the most athletic guy in this class. He's a versatile and high IQ defender, a great cutter and finisher, but his shot definitely needs work. The Spurs take someone who can finally bring some excitement to their franchise with his highlight reel dunks. I don't see them making 3 picks in this draft, but I just couldn't let Kendall Brown slip any further. On the season, he averaged about 10 points, 5 rebounds and 2 assists, shooting 58% from the field and 34% from 3, but on very low volume. But he's also a very underrated playmaker, and I can see him going top 20. At 26, the Bucks take the best shot blocker in the nation in Auburn's Walker Kessler. If he can eventually improve his three-point shooting under the guidance of Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis, he and Giannis could form one scary front court. He moves extremely well for someone who's 7'1". He's great as a roll man, and he can hit the three, but he is very unreliable at this point. On the season, he averaged about 11.5 points and over 8 rebounds, but also an insane 4.6 blocks per game. If teams buy his potential as a shooter, I can definitely see him going in the top 20 as well. The Heat come in at 27, and I have them taking Kennedy Chandler, the speedy point guard out of Tennessee. With Kyle Lowry set to retire in the next few years and Miami lacking a reliable backup point guard, I can see them taking Kennedy Chandler, and I think he'll be great in Miami's system. On the season, he averaged 14 points, almost 5 assists, and over 2 steals a game, shooting 46% from the field and about 38% from 3. Kennedy Chandler is a good playmaker and a great defender with a 6'5" wingspan. He's great at getting downhill, and he's an improving shooter. But I think his size hurts him a lot. He's probably under 6 foot tall, and because he's not a great shooter, it might hurt his stock a lot like it did to Sharif Cooper last year. At 28, I have the Warriors going with Wendell Moore Jr., the junior out of Duke. After taking two not-so-NBA-ready prospects last year in Kuminga and Moody, the Warriors go with Wendell Moore Jr., who is a great defender and has an extremely well-rounded game. He's a great shooter, can finish at the basket, and make plays for others. On the season, he averaged 13.5 points per game, over 5 rebounds, and almost 4.5 assists, as well as 1.4 steals on the defensive end. His splits were amazing, shooting 51% from the field and 41% from 3. But I think he'll end up being a late first round pick or early second because he is a junior. But he is only 20 years old, and he's even like a whole year younger than sophomore prospects like Keegan Murray. So I think he's definitely underrated. At 29, the Grizzlies come in with their last pick, and I have them taking Christian Koloko, the sophomore out of Arizona. Memphis go with a guy who can potentially replace Steven Adams down the line and form a super lengthy front court with Triple J. He's a great offensive rebounder with a 7'4" wingspan and a super athlete. On the season, he averaged about 12.5 points per game and over 7 rebounds, with almost 3 blocks a game. But with his inconsistent touch around the basket and skinny frame, I can see him being a late first round guy or potentially even an early second round pick. Now at the final pick in this mock draft, I have the Thunder selecting Ousmane Dieng out of the New Zealand Breakers. He struggled for the majority of the NBL season, but has finally found some sort of consistency and shown why he can be a first round talent. He's 6'9" with point forward potential, he's a pretty good defender and has flashed some shot creation potential, and he is a capable but inconsistent shooter. Over the last 5 games, he's averaged over 11 points per game and looked much better than he had earlier on in the season. His stats on the season are very poor, but with the 30th pick, the Thunder can go for another long-term project like Poku. That's a very low-risk, high-reward type pick. But this is definitely a pick I can see them trading if they don't like any of the prospects on the board. That's all for the first round of this mock draft. Now I'm just going to quickly shout out some guys that are definitely first-round talents, but unfortunately didn't make the mock draft, and that would be Vince Williams Jr., Blake Wesley, Terquavion Smith, Trevor Keels, Harrison Ingram, and Alondes Williams. So there are a few guys that I think are probably on the border of being first round picks. Let me know what you think, if there's anyone you think I left out, or there's anyone going too high or low. Leave a like, subscribe for more. JB Hoops.